Hi, it's David Krayden here for the Western Standard. This is our weekly roundup, and we're just getting into this. Our second broadcast, our weekly roundup of my columns. I try to write a column every day, try to be prolific as possible. To tell you the truth, if you ever watched any of those old Hollywood movies of the columnists from the Los Angeles or the New York papers, they used to write a column every day. I used to think, that would be a great job. Well, I've got that job today. I'm writing a column about parliamentary affairs every day. And it's a lot of fun. It really is, because the Western Standard doesn't take any government money. It's not beholden to Justin Trudeau, our dear Prime Minister. So I can say what I want, within reason, obviously. But there is real freedom of the press writing for an independent publication. So I'd just like to go through some of the columns I've been writing. And I must say, Justin Trudeau keeps me busy, and he's always saying something worth writing about. So I think that's, we're going to run through 3 columns today, talk about my YouTube page, and talk about why you should subscribe to the Western Standard. I think it's something you really, really ought to do. So with no further ado, let's move on to our first column. And that is, once again, all about Justin. And that's Trudeau catches COVID. Can you believe this? Justin Trudeau has caught COVID twice this year, and at least 3 times since the outbreak of the pandemic. And it's really worth reading about this, because I mean, yeah, we shouldn't laugh, but of course, Trudeau finds a silver lining in just about everything. And of course, what does he say? He goes on Twitter and he writes about the fact that, thank God I got that COVID booster shot, so I could, basically, I got COVID again. And it's so irrational, because he's getting COVID again the second time this year, and yet he's been boosted. He's got his 3rd COVID-19 shot. So if this vaccine is so incredibly effective, why is he getting COVID 3 times? And this, I haven't got it once. I have to confess, I've got 2 shots. I'm not getting a 3rd, because I've read too much about the side effects of this vaccine, and I'm certainly not going to get a 3rd or 4th jab. I think it's outrageous that they're now talking about 3 vaccines as being fully vaccinated. And there's Justin Trudeau talking about how effective it is getting the vaccine for a 3rd time. And he says, well, I'm not suffering as I could be. Of course, nobody's suffering with this latest variant. It's just like a mild flu. So what's the point? Anyway, that's and of course, he seems to have picked it up in the US, and he came back, and he's isolating someplace. So, but of course, there's nothing new there. He's been isolating as much as possible. Every time he goes anywhere, he's facing protesters. So nothing new there. So let's move on to our other column here. And this is one I found particularly interesting, because it's, I don't know if you've caught any of these hearings, if you follow American news, but there's something called the January 6th committee hearings going on. And it's just a sham, a complete sham. The Democrats have got together this hearing. They found 2 basically turncoat Republicans to join them. And they're trying to make this January 6th mob that entered the Capitol building and essentially just made fools of themselves before they were chased out. They're trying to make that event into an insurrection, like they were literally trying to take over the government. And of course, it was absolutely nothing like that. It was just a bunch of idiots running around for a while, and they were unarmed. And of course, nobody actually was killed except one of the rioters. And she wasn't even rioting. She was just sort of standing around watching things, and she was shot. So when you look at this, and you think, if this was an insurrection, it was a very ineffective one. And why are the Democrats still harping about this a year and a half later? Of course, the reason is they're not wanting to look at the real issues out there, like hyperinflation. That wasn't hyper yet, but it's getting there. Urban crime, lack of energy independence, gas prices that are going through the roof, and an open border, and a president that looks increasingly senile. So these are issues they don't want to look at, but they'd rather talk about something that happened a year and a half ago, and that really is a cipher in history now. And what does this have to do with Justin Trudeau? Well, he's increasingly looking for political enemies that he can claim are trying to undermine his government through nefarious means. And if he can claim that they're storing up guns, he can hype his gun control laws and take away handguns as if handguns are prevalent in Canada. Have you tried to ever own a handgun in Canada? It's pretty hard. And he can probably reinvigorate the long gun registry as well, which the previous Conservative government got rid of because it's ludicrous. All it does is target law-abiding hand or long gun owners, and largely people in rural areas who require them. And Trudeau was doing everything possible to create threats that are undermining his government, supposedly. And all of this, of course, is because he has very little else to deal with. He's facing increasing hostility because of his authoritarian ways, and because he's got problems at the gas pumps as well. We're paying $10 a gallon US equivalent in British Columbia, and we're very near that in most provinces. And that is taking a massive toll. And if you look at the price of groceries, of course, every week things are going up in a very drastic way. And he can claim that the economy is robust, but not really. We really haven't recovered. Businesses haven't recovered from the lockdowns of the pandemic. So he's looking to the United States for inspiration in many ways. Have you noticed that every time there's political activity in the United States on social issues, especially abortion and in gun control, Justin raises his hand and says, "Look at Canada. We've got the toughest gun control laws. Abortion is legal on demand, unrestricted abortion on demand in Canada, and it's going to stay that way. We have no abortion law here." And yet he's still trying to get some sort of political hype out of this. And it's very worrisome because he's got nothing to offer except a lot of oxygen. And that's typical for Justin Trudeau. So the third column I wanted to look at here is interesting story last week of a very liberal district attorney in San Francisco, Chesia Boudin, who was turfed in a recall vote by the very liberal voters of San Francisco. And doesn't bode well for the Democratic Party because it announces essentially a civil war in that party, because there's the Democrats who are so woke they'll never get to sleep again. And there's the Democrats who are more traditional, who believe in some common sense policies and don't think criminals should be running around the streets shoplifting at will. And Boudin was one of those Democrats who thinks he should be on the side of the criminals, not the victims, even though he's supposed to be a prosecutor, not a defense lawyer. And that's how he was behaving. He basically got turfed with 61% of the vote opposing him in this recall. So Joe Biden, I don't even know if he noticed or took note. Certainly his advisors did. But I'm sure Justin Trudeau still has enough cognitive sense to realize that if San Francisco can start to say, hey, enough woke politics, then maybe people in Canada are going to say enough woke politics and enough Justin Trudeau, because where is it getting us? And Justin Trudeau can talk about gun control all he wants and freezing handguns, and I'm sure he's going to get to confiscating handguns, just like he's talking about confiscating so-called assault rifles. But what that really means, of course, is that it's a non-issue in Canada. It's virtually impossible to own a handgun already, except if you're a criminal, of course, and you can get them on the black market. You can get them across the border. But Justin Trudeau likes to use this as an issue, except that he doesn't want to impose mandatory minimum sentencing on people who commit gun crimes, because he claims that's discriminatory against people of color and Indigenous peoples. So therefore, he's even woke about that. So he's not prepared to punish people for gun crimes. He just wants to punish people, law-abiding people, for owning guns. And that's what it always comes down to. So I think Justin looked at this issue. Wanted to touch on one thing. We haven't got the column up, but of course, yesterday, just after saying never going to happen here, Trudeau announces that yes, they're going to lift the vaccine restrictions on domestic travel. So now, as of June 20th, if you haven't been vaccinated, you can get on an aircraft or a train and travel within Canada. We're about the last country on earth to do that, and it's high time. Just a week or so ago, the Liberals opposed a Conservative motion to do just that because the science wasn't behind it. Well, yesterday the science was. Of course, nothing had changed. What really had changed is that the airlines and the airports made a big noise about it because the lineups were getting atrocious. And Justin Trudeau doesn't listen to public opinion. And if you think Justin Trudeau listens to public opinion, Justin Trudeau does not listen to public opinion. He could not give a care about what you think. But when it comes to big money, whether it be big pharmacy or whether it be banks, people who have big donations to the Liberal Party, he listens very attentively. Despite talking a good talk about being with the little guy, Justin Trudeau only listens to the big guy. And that's because he understands money. He was born into wealth, and all he's ever really been is a member of the idle rich who taught drama. He never even worked in the drama field. He's never been in a Broadway play, or he's never worked as a professional actor. He taught drama. And I don't even know if he was very good at that. He certainly hasn't been very good as a prime minister. But Justin Trudeau certainly acts the job as a prime minister very well. And he somehow has managed to stay there since 2015. But it's got nothing to do with the science. Justin Trudeau has not ever made a decision based on the science. It's always been based on the politics. And that's what it's all about for Justin Trudeau. So he's made this decision. And guess who gets screwed again in the process? The truckers. Yes. The people he hates most of all, the guys who came to Ottawa back in February, who he imposed the Emergencies Act upon, the truckers. They still can't come across the border without isolating for 14 days. And they still have to get vaccinated. So they're not part of this deal, no, and they won't be anytime soon because he really doesn't like those truckers. They embarrassed him on the world stage. Even the Europeans are usually fall for his breathless declarations for world peace and globalism and disarmament and democratic values. They weren't buying it the last time he went to Europe. They were, shaking their heads and almost puking. It was that bad. So they're not buying it at all. Now, I want to get on a couple of other things before we say our leave here. And it's, I think it's very, very important that we touch on this. And that is, I want you all to have a look at my Krayden's Right YouTube channel. Now you can go to it by going to Krayden's Right, and please sign up to it. It's very important, and you can read columns. You can see some of my videos, and you can see what we're up to. We want to grow this channel. It's very, very important. And really think the future of what we're doing here is going to be on video much more than talk radio. And I think this is the future. And this is something the Western Standard believes in as well. That's where the folks there are trying to move. That's the direction they're trying to move in, is increasing the video to move people towards the written word, but even more so to do what talk radio has done in the past. Not necessarily as much in Canada, but what it has done south of the border in the United States. So I think that's that's very important. As so look at that YouTube channel, Krayden's Right, with David Krayden, and I think we need you to support that. It's very important you do so. And I want to touch on one other matter before we conclude here, and this is very important. I talked about independent media at the beginning here, and a lot of people don't know that it's not just the CBC that is state media. CBC is $1.2 billion a year that the government spends. I'm not going to say invest. It's not an investment. It's profligate spending, because the CBC takes in that money and they just do with whatever they want, including lots of high-priced parties in addition to the news gathering and the entertainment that they produce. And they also, sell a lot of commercial time, and in addition to the taxpayer dollars they take in. But the other stations, of course, are being subsidized as well, like Global and CTV, and a lot of the other mainstream media are taking government money now. And why do you suppose the government wants to offer the media money? So they can control them. If you give people money, they're inclined to mute or muffle their criticism of the government. And I call this the carrot and the stick, because the government insists upon approving now, giving their journalism seal of approval to media outlets, or you don't get your Parliamentary Press Bureau accreditation, or you don't get your official seal of approval from the government as a journalistic outlet. And there are some media outlets in Canada that have been refused that because they have been adjudicated to be not genuine journalistic outlets or media outlets. So that's the stick. The carrot is the money. And that's what this government does very well. They dispense money and they say, wink, wink, you want more of this, just keep giving us the coverage we want. So you go to a news conference in Ottawa and the questions are just so inane and insipid. And they're all softball questions. None of the approved media, the ones who get the questions, are asking anything tough, anything challenging, anything that is demanding of the government. They're always very easy questions. That's, we call them softball questions because they're easy to catch. And so people are not asking anything that's too tough to answer. And that's the idea here. So I want you to subscribe to the Western Standard. It's westernstandard.news. Go on. If you want to, you get a free few stories. Then you have to subscribe. Do so. Subscribe. You can read my material and a lot of great writers. The Western Standard is reaching out and getting some fantastic editorial staff. It's a very exciting place to work. It's growing. It's growing by the day, as a matter of fact. It's growing by the day. It's independent media. That's where it's at right now in Canada, because it is not beholden to the Trudeau government. It is saying what it needs to say. It's saying what needs to be said in Canada. So I encourage you to do that today. I really do. And I don't want to wear out my welcome here. So until next week, I'm David Krayden, the senior parliamentary correspondent for the Western Standard, enjoying this job like I never have any other. And I'll be back next week. Keep reading my columns, and I thank you. Bye for now.